Oh, thank you, ma'am. All righty, everybody, get ready to sing along because here comes the theme song. I've been to Romamu, I've been to BJ, I've searched all over for a place to pray. I found the mosh pit and knew that this was it. I am a moshnik and I'm here to stay. And I'm turning gray. I found community that is in tune with me, singing and dancing in our Zoom agog. Some contemplation mixed with elation. I am a moshnik and I'm here to stay. And I'm turning gray. Everybody sing along. A chance to meet you, a chance to greet you, a time to deepen what it means to belong. So let's have some fun tonight and spread some joy and light. I am a moshnik and I'm here to stay. And I'm turning gray. Let's hear Hoff on the harmonica. Even when he's not here, Hoff is here. Thank you. With apologies to Neil Young, of course. Welcome, everyone. And welcome to our special guests tonight, Rabbi Kevin Hale and Miriam Lewin, who are going to take questions and answers after we're all done. But first of all, welcome, Kevin. Welcome, Miriam. You can unmute yourself for a moment.
Thank you. I have never been greeted like that. For all of the screenings we've done, I've never started out smiling so broadly.
I told you, this place is very different. And everybody here will agree with that. And Reb Kevin, welcome. Reb Kevin, tell everybody where you are.
I'm in Northampton, Massachusetts. Well, I'm actually here with you right now.
Yes, you are.
And just delighted to be with all you new friends and old friends. So thank you.
And Miriam, where are you? I'm only going to preface with forget about it.
Correct. I'm in Brooklyn, New York.
There you go. Yeah, thank you very much. Let me introduce the two of you more properly now with what you sent me. And actually, I like to surprise myself. So when I asked you before, Miriam, about where you were from, and you asked me if I read, and the answer is no, because I like to experience things firsthand.
And I am a producer, and I want every detail organized in advance.
I gotcha. We would work well together. So I'll introduce you first, Miriam. The director and producer of Commandment 613 is Miriam Lewin. Is joining us from
the pronouncer. Very good.
So how else would one pronounce?
We give pronouncers. Thank you.
From Brooklyn, her films include documentaries about teaching the arts, housing discrimination, and the Yale Glee Club. She also produces classical music radio programs, and you might have heard some of her Jewish holiday specials hosted by violinist Yitzhak Perlman. And she manages the world's oldest opera super title business. We're going to know more about that later. By the way, welcome, Miriam. By the way, everyone,
thank you.
As I said, there's going to be a Q&A afterwards, so take some notes if you would like to remember what it is that you wanted to ask, because most of us are in our 60s and older, and we're going to go, oh, I had a question, but I can't remember what it was. Rabbi Kevin Hale, whom we will meet in the film, is joining us from Northampton, Massachusetts. His work includes evaluating and restoring Torah scrolls, which, by the way, he did for mine, scribing other sacred items, and teaching about the scribal traditions of Judaism. Since 2012, he's been one of the approved scribes for the Czech scrolls that belong to the Memorial Scrolls Trust. And As I mentioned, we worked together now 4.5 years ago. Kevin led a group of students at the Kala Jewish Renewal Summer Fun Fest when it was an Amherst, Mass. And they took a look inside my Torah scroll and found some interesting things, which hopefully I might be able to remember some of that too after we're done.
And we can show people at the Moses retreat.
Oh, yes, good idea. So let's all make sure we're muted. Because for the next,
Mark, just for backup, would you make me co-host, please?
I would be happy to, Renee. There we go. We got a good backup now. Okie doke. And I'm going to spotlight myself because we'll have a full screen for the movie when we begin. So welcome, everyone. It is my delight and honor to present this lovely and really what I found. Oh, sorry, don't do that. I hate it when other people comment about things you're about to see. Not going to give you my review, but Commandment 613.
My name is Kevin Hale, and I am a sofer, a Torah scribe. This is my studio, office, workshop. I like to call it scriptorium sometimes. My work mostly involves the repair and restoration of Torah scrolls. What is a Torah scroll? A Torah scroll is the 5 books of Moses written in Hebrew on the skin of a kosher animal by hand, following ancient rules. So as we roll through the Torah scroll, whenever we have God saying to do this or don't do this, that is one of the commandments or mitzvahs. And by traditional count, there's 613. And it's generally accepted that the last one, 613 out of 613, is God saying to Moses, and now write this song for yourselves and teach it to the children of Israel. Ve'ata kitvu lachem et hashira hazod ve'lamda et bnei Yisrael.
The Torah is the one thing that binds all Jews together. Regardless of whether they believe in Torah min hashamayim, God gave the Torah to the Jews and to Moses on Mount Sinai, or whether they believe it's a compilation made at a later date. It also, however, is the Pentateuch, revered by Christianity, and the Al Tawrat, the 5 books of Musa, revered by Islam.
The love and devotion and accuracy with which we have perpetuated this text by hand really reflects how central Torah is to us. This attempts to be the brains of my operation, of the different projects that are going on, mixed with family history. This is my father, Ken Hale, in the years after he arrived in this country in the late 40s, and he worked as a cabinet maker, woodworker. Hale, my last name, was Heilbutt in Germany, and Heilbutt means halibut. And I just was posing by a halibut. And when we had our family reunions, our slogan was, we all got together just for the halibut. My own family background was classic German Jewish secular. In fact, my father said that he didn't even know that he was Jewish until Nazism was rising. And God, religion was really, an outdated idea that made sense for generations past. My family was fortunate to escape, and I grew up with stories about what they experienced, but even what life was like before the Holocaust, and grew up with such a sense of this beautiful legacy that was gone When the Nazis came through Europe, they destroyed not only Jewish lives, Jewish civilizations, but also Jewish material culture.
In 1939, the Germans invaded Czechoslovakia. This resulted in the destruction of the Jewish community, which had been there for over 1,000 years. The synagogues were asked to send all their Judaica to Prague, where it was stored in the Jewish Museum.
The very workers who did this sacred task of preserving and cataloging Judaica, with only 2 exceptions, were murdered, and the Jews who read from these scrolls, with few exceptions, were murdered, and the communities themselves were destroyed, and yet these Torahs survived. In 1963, the Czechoslovak government, in search of hard currency, approached an art dealer in London about the remaining 1,564 scrolls.
In 1964, these were brought to London. Many of them were repaired and sent to communities around the world. Approximately 150 remained in London, which are now part of the Czech Memorial Scrolls Museum.
When I first introduced this project, I said, think of the Torah as a person. And how would it feel if it could not tell its story, if it were neglected? It would be like a second death.
You know, I hold the Torah like a baby, so as lovingly and firmly as I can. We've got these 304,805 letters in the Torah scroll. No vowels, no dots, no punctuation periods. It's only those letters themselves. And no pressure, but maybe the entire universe is relying on them being accurate. In taking a Torah that was not kosher and restoring it so that it can take its place with the other scrolls and be read in the context of a living community in a Torah service, in that ordinary use, in a sense, it elevates it even higher. There are questionable letters here. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Ha'aretz tohu vavohu v'choshech. So and the darkness that was on the earth, that has really no ink left. It's just this brown stain. So the goal of this restoration at the minimum is to do all structural repairs, repair all letters that are questionable in their legibility, and then go at least one step higher so that, say, another 10 years goes by before you might really want to have it checked again.
For my bat mitzvah, I would use that Torah because it would be cool to actually be reading from it and connecting with that specific Torah.
I grew up on Long Island and attended a Reform synagogue, began to prepare for bar mitzvah, and dropped out beforehand. My family was not so connected with Jewish life and practice. And yet, you know, this is what you did. You joined a synagogue and prepared for bar mitzvah, but there really wasn't a very clear sense of why. But there's something I remember about that synagogue, which is on the margins of the service that we would occasionally go to on a Friday night were these older guys, and they were davening. They were sort of, you know, part of this old world that was more continuous with a time back in the old country where prayer really mattered and Torah really mattered. But at the time, I didn't understand. No one brought me right up to the Torah and said, this is the Torah. You could write the Torah yourself if you wanted. So we have a custom as a preparation for writing anything in Torah or Tefillin or Mezuzah to first write Amalek's name and cross it out. So Amalek is a character in Torah, sort of like Voldemort, sort of embodiment of evil. So I have a quill that I only use for writing Amalek's name. So the words mean erase the memory of Amalek from under heaven, do not forget. Timche et zecher Amalek mitachat hashamayim velo tishkach. This is a quill that is also used for one purpose, and it's for writing any of the azkarot or names of God. I will tend to remove the barbs on one side so it's not confused with others, and then have a supply of ink that I only use for that purpose as well. These are stick or reed pens, and Torahs that were written in medieval Spain, North Africa, or the Middle East tended to be written in this style, and these are oak galls or gallnuts, and they are growths on oak leaves. The tannin in these creates the blackness of Torah ink by oxidizing. So this is parchment. It is a writing material from the skin of an animal, and it's made by a mostly mechanical process of stretching and sanding and scraping. And the animal might die another way, but it shouldn't be killed for the Torah. This is a thimble that I occasionally use when sewing the panels of the Torah together, that is, the separate pieces of parchment, or sewing the ends to the wooden rollers. And we sew with a special thread called giddin that's made from the fibers of the dried vein or tendon or sinew of the same kind of animal as the Torah itself. The needles themselves are silver-plated, following a custom that I learned from my teacher of avoiding using base metals in direct contact with Torah. It's like copper, iron, bronze, steel, that might be associated with weapons of war. So I have my copy of the Torah in front of me in case there's any question about what the letters are. Hareini kotev sefer Torah zot l'shem kedushat sefer Torah. Behold, I am writing this Torah for the sake of the holiness of Torah. And just as we remember that God sang out the words of Torah and Moses wrote them down, we sing out each word in letter as it's written. Vayetze Aleph Sofit. I was a classics major in college, which prepared me to be a toy maker in my 20s. That's actually where I was really first introduced to the concept of sacred craft. At the same time, I started trying to turn my associations with Judaism into something positive. I sensed that there were treasures in Judaism, and I wanted to find them. When I was 29, I followed a calling to become a rabbi. Even in the years when I was leading a synagogue as a pulpit rabbi, I was really interested in this idea that we should write our own Torah. My teacher, Rabbi Dr. Eric Ray, taught me how to write and repair Torahs, following traditions that go back thousands of years. And he loved the variety of Torah, that he saw how Torahs are all different. They reflect times, places, and even personalities, and yet the text is not different. And I think we shared sort of a playfulness about it. And his playfulness made him always ask more about where did this come from and what was the conditions under which it was written. So this is the Memorial Scrolls Trust standard issue plaque.
Yes.
That says who it belongs to and what number it is.
Right. This goes back to the community that owned it originally, and I don't know how old that is. So this Torah is from Lipnik Nad Betchvu, which is a town in Eastern Moravia. As I started researching, I went to the internet, I just typed in the name of the town, and there was a newspaper article about one of the Holocaust survivors from the town teaching the students about the Holocaust. He was the last boy to become a bar mitzvah using this Torah before the Holocaust. This is where it tore. And this is the name of God. So we're going to take this section out, these 3 columns, 1, 2, 3. And the sofer is going to rewrite them.
Yes.
And sew in a new panel.
Quite sharp.
Yes.
So there's a sense in this way of rewriting that I imagine that the scribe is following my hand. And sometimes I learn something about even the personality of the scribe by the way he forms the letter.
This particular Torah has a special significance to me because I was 4.5 years in the concentration camp. I do consider that the Torah and I are really survivors.
These letters have been repaired. They're a little bit blacker than the others. Jews arrived in Lipnik in 1510. That's deep, long. It's, I can't name my ancestors back that far, right? So now I have a connection to a kind of ancestor, right? So that's what this Torah means to me. It's an unfolding story that just keeps getting deeper and broader and connecting me in more and more ways to the Jewish people and to their journey.
So sometimes I will spend days when I'm copying a Uriah to really understand what is the script that the scribe was using. So let's play with pay. We have a concept in Judaism that when you do a mitzvah, you should do it as beautifully as possible. It's called hidur mitzvah. So I am as good a calligrapher as I can be, but the calligraphy in itself does not make for a kosher Torah. Hey. One cannot write a kosher Torah and not also understand what one is writing. So therefore, a professional scribe must be well-versed in Torah. So you're engaging your mind and you're engaging your hands and your craft, but then there's another ingredient without which the Torah is not kosher. And whether this is soul or heart, there needs to be an ingredient of this being done specifically for the sake of the holiness of Torah. When I met my teacher, I saw in his comfort with his personal way of speaking about God, that I could even relax and tap into this language that my great-grandparents were absolutely comfortable with. And it's only in the last 150 years that there's been this idea that, oh no, God is an old-fashioned concept. If the idea of God is not deeply, deeply meaningful, it's actually not God. God is what has inspired us to continue to write Torah, to survive. And I feel fortunate to have figured out how to have a relationship with that. It's very healing to restore Torahs that were really slated for destruction. And beyond that, I feel that I'm able to engage in really rebuilding Jewish life. Hareini kotev Sefer Torah Zot L'Shem Kiddushat Sefer Torah.
Commandment 613 is the obligation for every Jew to write a Sefer Torah before they die. In fact, like many things in Judaism, there are many interpretations of this requirement. And you might even write a letter, or you might put your hand on the hand of a sofer who is writing a letter. The important thing is that you are connected to Torah.
With the Torah that is already written, already completed, but needs repair, the last letters are left somewhat incomplete, so that members of that congregation can actually have the experience of writing it or having the scribe write it for them. So the moment of rebirth would be when the last of the 304,805 letters is back to being legible. And it is really no less a celebration as a new Torah. I think in a really real sense, all the hands that touch the Torah, whether they're the scribes who wrote it, those who read from it, those who carried it, you can think of the hands that handled the Torah in the museum and brought it to London, are all really engaged in this ultimate commandment of writing and perpetuating Torah.
I was surprisingly so emotional, and just to think of when was the last time somebody read from this Torah to a congregation, and that we've had that opportunity today.
I just don't expect to retire, and I expect to be working until the end of my life. And I don't know what's after this life, but were I to look back on a long, hopefully productive life and say, I spent a lot of my time fixing Torahs so that they would be kosher and usable and teaching, I would feel that was a worthwhile use of a lifetime.
Let's give a Moshe Amen to that. Thank you so much, Rabbi Kevin and Miriam. Immediate question that I have is at the very end of the credits rolling. Explain to us, Rabbi Kevin, what STAM, sofer STAM means.
Oh, it's STAM is an acronym. Actually, in popular usage in Hebrew, it just means plain, but the acronym is for STM, Sefer Torah to fill in mezuzah. So the three places that that STAM is written.
So welcome to everyone who has joined us since we began, especially all the new people to Moshe Minyan Oneg Shabbat. I want to encourage you to ask questions in the following way. I know that all of you have appreciation for the film, and perhaps the appreciation's put in the chat. And if you have a question, you can start with an appreciation, but raise your hand. Either virtually or where you are, waving frantically until I notice that you are you have a question to ask, and then we'll go from there. I have a number of questions, but I want to leave it to you all first to ask your questions. So who would like to start us off? You can. They're rolling in. Now here are the reviews. Okay, this is great. Yashikoa, great film. Delighted to see and hear my dear friend Rabbi Merrill. When we for Brangen purchased our last Torah, I drove it to Rabbi Kevin for him to check it. Yeah, so that has to happen for sure. Mel Schnapper, please, Mel, start us off.
Yeah, hi. This is a suggestion. If you go to the Museum of the Bible, a new museum in Washington, D.C., they have a scribe who's there all the time, and he will give you a piece of paper with your name written in the same script as the Torah. I forgot the man's name, but he's there all the time.
So thank you, Mel. And maybe that leads us into an obvious question. If you can tell us a little bit about your training as a sofer and what goes into it, and typically how long might it take?
Well, in my case, I was very fortunate to have a teacher who was he was really my Rebbe. And it's funny, Miriam filmed 33 hours, and I don't remember if I said this, that it was in the film or not. But over the course of about 4 years, I would spend a few days a month at his house in Great Neck, Long Island. I'd spend the days with him and his wife, watching, learning, sometimes helping, practicing, and the evenings with my parents, because I grew up near there. And at about 3.5 years, Rabbi Ray said, let's find you a commission for a Torah. But he passed away soon after. But a couple of you were in a class that I once gave it was another place, but it was a crash course in mezuzah writing. So it is possible to just learn the basics to start writing. But I really, had to immerse myself for about 4 years, and I keep on learning.
Bracha Laster says it was at the National Chavurah Institute.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mindy Reiser. Mindy, you want to share your video so we can see you?
Okay, this is wonderful. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm curious as to how many people the current estimate is who have the competence to be sofrim, and where are they getting their training? And are there any women who are sofrot?
I can only guess the number of sofrim, a few thousand, most of them in Israel. Most of them learn, there's schools for learning in the more traditional world, but there's really an amazing phenomenon of sofrot, or as someone pointed out in a class I taught on emergency Torah repair skills, scribes who were other than men. And one in particular, I just don't remember her first name, Friedman, has been training many, mostly young people. So, we're kind of at the beginning of sort of an American phenomenon of women as scribes.
Yeah, we covered that last Wednesday night in our class, how soferot do exist. In the same way as mohalot do exist as well.
Yeah. And this is the Jewish world. It might take a few hundred years or a dozen years to just figure out how that's normal, but it'll work itself out.
We have a long timeline. Kevin, I don't want you to get a big head thinking that all the questions are coming your way. So let's make sure that we also include Miriam here. And Miriam, I'm curious about how you and Kevin met.
How Rabbi Kevin and I met?
Yes.
Was that the question? I have known Rabbi Kevin his entire life, because we are in fact first cousins. So I knew he was a rabbi and I knew he was a scribe. And one day I was visiting him and his family, and he started telling me about his work with this particular set of scrolls, the Czech scrolls that belong to the Memorial Scrolls Trust. And I blithely said, that sounds like a film. And it was actually, I had never made a film without a client before. So it was kind of a leap for me. And he blithely said, oh, okay, trusting me. And then we filmed for 33 hours over 3 or 4 years. Speaking of, let me show the picture. Can I show the picture?
Please.
Okay. So you may remember this picture from about 3.5 minutes in to the film. So that's Kevin's mother, and that's my father, and that's their parents, and that's right before they left Germany in 1939. Thank you.
Wow. And Miriam, let me ask, once you met Kevin, and how does a documentary such as this take shape?
You start with an idea, and then the idea changes whenever you film. And we filmed, not for 3 or 4 years, but a few times a year. And you keep refining it. I always knew that I wanted it to be the story of a congregation having its Torah inspected and repaired, but I also wanted to learn a lot about Torah scrolls, because I actually didn't know much about Torah scrolls. Actually, everything in the movie I learned. I didn't know there were 613 commandments. I didn't know that Torah scrolls could be kosher. So it's a great privilege as a documentary filmmaker. You get to ask all the stupid questions you want, and people answer you very respectfully and seriously. And then you take all that and you somehow turn it into a film. And I had a wonderful collaborator, my camera woman editor, Randy Cicchini, who we had worked together before. We knew each other well. She was interested in kind of the spiritual journey of Rabbi Hale, and I was interested more in the technical details of the things that I thought everybody should know about Torahs. And so we worked together on that.
Sounds like a good team. Marlena? And then Dan.
My question is for Kevin. The process seemed deeply meditative and even mystical. And you had mentioned God during the film, and I wanted to know how it brings you into deeper spirituality and maybe closer to God.
Oh, wow. What a great question for the next year of Wednesdays. Our family, coming from Germany, and especially my father's family from Germany, were really pretty secular. And it took a while to understand that I don't need to sort of defend a God idea. Someone said, well, do you believe in God? And I thought about it and I said, well, I just believe God. So I don't think that this sacred craft needs to be more mystical. I mean, okay, meditative in that there has to be tremendous focus, but I have to say I'm very pragmatic, and if I were to be blissing out on the letter pay with the spirals, which really you can do, it frankly would be a distraction. So it's a kind of the practice of chopping wood and carrying water and again, and but that is a practice. Thank you. I mean,
Dan.
Yes, thank you. I have 2 questions. One from a historical point of view. It was mentioned that the synagogues in Czechoslovakia would send all their Torahs in to Prague, and it wasn't quite clear whether this was going to be a good idea or a bad idea. Historically, did anybody find out that this was a plan to collect them all and destroy them, or it really was a plan by the Jews to collect them and save them? Was it ever really figured out? I can imagine that this could have gone the other way very easily. And in a sense, why didn't it? Why didn't all of these get destroyed in the hands of the Nazis? That's one question. The other one is from a sofer point of view. Do you ever find variations, mistakes, or things there that you have to look back and say, wait a second, in this book it's this, in this Torah it's that, and I need to figure out or research what it's supposed to be?
Miriam, well, in terms of anomalies, I guess, there's different styles, and sometimes I will wonder, and if you notice that 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and in Torah writing 7 take crowns, and like, why is this letter heavily embellished with beautiful crowns and this one very simple? So they're not, they're not different texts. I would say scribes, really without exception, are writing within a framework, and but there's great variety, and I think that scribes kind of personalize, maybe do almost a kind of commentary by emphasizing a letter, making it just a little more beautiful. But there's also just variations because it's a human making each one. In terms of what was going on in Prague in circa 1942 is quite a question. And Mary, you obviously had to immerse yourself in the history. So if you want to take it.
Well, I actually I probably spent more time writing the sentence about that you saw on screen about the intention behind collecting than any other part of this film, because I wanted to sort of get the nuance as well as the facts. So it's my understanding that the initiative to collect the ritual items came from the people who worked at the Jewish Museum in Prague, which had been around for 40 years at that point, the museum. And somehow they got permission to gather these objects. What the Nazis intended for this is somewhat debatable. There are many people who think that there was supposed to be a museum of a vanished race. That has never been proved. After the war, during the war, why weren't these things destroyed? I don't know. After the war, they sat around, and eventually when the Czech government, the communist government, needed cash, they looked around at treasures that were available to sell, and that's how they wound up in London. That's sort of the thumbnail version.
Yeah, if I can add, my wife Ruth and I were in the Czech Republic, Bohemia, the first part of November, and primarily we were visiting some of the towns that the scrolls came from, with a photographer, Sheila Palais, and a historian. Actually, we also connected with a couple of different groups that were there, and I'm going to just post a link about what was going on with this particular town of Patzov. But I went to Prague asking, well, where was the original Jewish museum? And what I learned was that before the war, it was a really small collection, and it wasn't there was not a building dedicated to it. So when we think of Jewish museum, there still is not a single building that is, like going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And the Jewish Museum today is really housed in a number of different buildings, different synagogues. But what was a modest collection that probably was, could have been movable, became enormous because of the collection of sacred objects from synagogues in the region.
Yeah, thank you, Rabbi Kevin. Dan, was there a question answered? Because
All
I
right,
think
hold on a second. I have a visual aid. The photographer that Kevin mentioned is Sheila Pele, and she has done this gorgeous book of photographs of Jewish remnants of the towns where the scrolls were collected, which I recommend to you highly, like Beyond the Shadows.
Thank you, Miriam. Dan, you asked a question that I'm not sure that I'm answering a question that you asked, or whether I'm asking a question, answering a question that I heard. But many years ago, Renee and I, we davened at the Egalitarian Minyan in Washington, D.C. at Addis, Israel. And in the middle of the Torah reading, the Baal Kriya stopped. And what was going on was the Baal Kriya saw a letter that he didn't think was correct. So what happened was something I was unfamiliar with at the time. Who do they confer with at that moment? Does anybody know? If a letter appears to be correct, who does the Baal Kriya turn to in the congregation? Does anybody have any idea? Well, the answer is a child who knows his or her Aleph Bet, but not who knows much more than that. And they bring the child up to the sofer and to take a look at the letter in question and to ask that child, what letter do you see? Now, I don't know why it took a half, I don't know what, I seem to remember it was like a half hour, but it did take what seemed to be a long time because there was disagreement. Then they had to bring up several children to look at this particular letter. So Dan, I don't know if you asked that question about what if there's an incorrect letter and how that might even happen, as you were just sharing with us before, Rabbi Kevin, about that you're following along in the Sefer, in a copy of it all the time in each letter. How might that happen?
You said that we are people of the book, and I think we are people of the spell checking, because so we've maintained this incredible integrity of this text. And if you're laning and you mispronounce, you probably have 30 people calling out the correct thing. It does occasionally happen that with all the checking and all that's done when a scroll is first written, and the checking that's done because it's read aloud, that it turns out that there was actually an error that was overlooked. Usually it's something like a word repeated that just isn't noticed, or so it happens. Incidentally, when I'm restoring a scroll that's in rough condition and thinking about, can't really replace every single piece of ink of every letter, it would be prohibitively expensive. But I have in mind that kid, that kid who's right between knowing but not quite adult, as I scan a column and think, triage essentially, which are the letters that need attention and which don't.
Just to follow up on my question about that, the classic one that I'm thinking of is who and he, with the extended yud that comes down. That it's supposed to be this, but it's actually been written like this. There's a bunch of places in the Torah where that mistake, in a sense, has been continued. And or am I completely off base with this? Which is quite possible.
It's just that I don't know if it's a mistake. It is the text that it is, with interesting quirks, and it's my teacher. He really was very progressive, but loved being very conservative and strict. And, we receive the text and try to pass it on as we receive it.
Thank you. Beryl, what do you have for us? Hi, Beryl. Thanks for coming.
Hi. It was a wonderful film. I have a couple questions, and I'm sorry I joined a little late. It's been a crazy day. I'm glad I joined. For Miriam, you said you're a documentary filmmaker, and I didn't hear your bio beforehand. And if there's some place I can look to see what your bio is, I love writing film too, but I'm a narrative screenwriter at the moment. But I'm interested in documentary as well. And so I just wanted to get an idea. Do you only do Jewish documentaries, or do you do other documentaries? How'd you get into documentary filmmaking? That was my question.
Well, first of all, my hat is off to you because I have no imagination. So narrative film is a complete mystery to me. I enjoy it, but I can't do it. I have made a lot of films on arts topics, especially teaching the arts. And as Rabbi Mark read in my bio, I also made one about the Yale Glee Club, and I've made film about housing discrimination, and yeah, basically whatever somebody pays me to do. As I said earlier, this is the first film that I ever made that somebody wasn't paying me to do.
Aha.
I want to hear the part that's about how you became a filmmaker.
Well, I was just going to say the rewards of this film have been far greater than any monetary rewards for any other film. How did I become a filmmaker?
Yeah.
It started in opera. My first career was in opera administration. And we did a lot of telecasts. This was the Opera Company of Philadelphia. And I got really interested in television and film, and I went to work for a documentary filmmaker in New York, and then I started doing it myself.
Kay Elephant, welcome to Minyan Onig Shabbat.
Thank you. A quick comment and then the question. Am I being heard okay?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, so I took that original class at the Institute with Kevin, and even though I had some experience and a couple of jobs, small jobs, with English italic calligraphy and my beloved Yerushalmi alphabet in Hebrew, it's a real far cry from doing the Torah alphabet and doing a cloth in 4 days. It was a wonderful class, but it's really something to learn even a taste of this. I thought I'm watching this on my phone, so it's very small. And I thought I saw at the beginning of this film logos from film festivals at the bottom, across the bottom. Did I see that? And is this entered as shorts, as a short in a bunch of film festivals? End of question.
Yeah, well, you didn't see those in the film, the logos. You might have seen it if you looked, if you clicked on a link online to the website. Unless Rabbi Mark, unless you put logos into your publicity, I don't know. But it has played at about 20 Jewish film festivals. And Kevin and I have done presentations for dozens of synagogues and conferences. And here I'll give you my pitch. If you have a synagogue or an art group or any kind of group of friends that would be interested in a fee to try to.
There we go.
What?
We lost you for a minute. I think we lost you again.
Sorry. That's because I said we charge a modest fee to do screening, but we love doing these screenings. So if anybody's interested, let me know.
Great. And I can put anybody in touch with Miriam if you're interested. Haf and Sheila after that.
Yes, to Miriam, I want to congratulate you on the editing process. I know how easy it is to shoot and how hard it is to edit, and there are a lot of hard decisions to make what's left on the floor or cutting room floor. I'm glad you did not leave that quote from the survivor who said, "The Torah and I are both survivors." And I really love that little poignant moment. So thank you for that. Kevin, I appreciate the fact that now I've heard from someone who's read and written the Torah, and he says, I don't know what there is after this life. So I appreciate that, because I didn't think the exact answer was in there. And I'm glad to see that there's still some questioning in your mind about that. And lastly, I want to ask you about the preservation of not the letters, but the actual scrolls themselves and the material around it that might be deteriorating. What can you say about the process of restoring and keeping that in good shape?
I really welcome whatever insight about what there is after this life. And as I just crossed into the 60s not so long ago, and it's becoming a more and more of a question. Doesn't need to be answered. Although I was struck, of what was edited down in that last line that I don't quite remember saying, that I was never going to retire. So about, taking the restoration of a Torah, it could be the letters, it could be sewing the git in the thread, or patching parchment. And depending on how the parchment's prepared or where it spent its life, it may be in great shape or it may not be. I guess it points to a question that I am exploring. Many of these scrolls are already 250 years old, and it's amazing that some of them can be restored and used. But looking forward, I've encountered some scrolls that I don't think should be restored. And is there a point at which even these precious Torahs that are survivors of the Holocaust, that they might be allowed to be buried the way some Torahs are? It's just a question kind of musing on.
Sheila.
Hi, I am thrilled with this program. Last week I shared that my Zadie, I'm figuring this out, he escaped from the Tsar's band in Russia. And I think the city was called Vilna, Minsk. And he recalled that in his family, he used to see members of the family sitting in long white robes, writing the Torah. Their last name was Pargament, which I understand was translation for parchment. And he ended up, at the tender age of 15, escaping so he wouldn't be drafted into the Tsar's army, and eventually came to America. I'm totally fascinated and have been so. I had an occasion to write a letter in a Torah up here in Frederick, and I remember I was just overwhelmed with the idea that not only doing that, but the idea that perhaps this was a Torah that my ancestors had written. All I remember about it was, it would be on deer skin. What I'd like to know is there a way, and I'm real curious about this now, is there a way to find out exactly where a Torah came from? What is the procedure for that? Is there a society that does that? Because instead of me wondering all the time, I'd love to know if those Torahs are still out there.
I suppose that there's some scientific way of testing and figuring out where that particular animal is from. My teacher, Eric Ray, who was a brilliant master scribe and looked at thousands of scrolls, said it was very, very rarely. So he could distinguish, he said, 2,000 different styles of writing Hebrew. There are regional styles. There's styles that are clearly from a region, but a scribe trained somewhere else. But he said very, very rarely would he see a script and say that was the same scribe. However, Vilna had a very distinctive and classy style. And if you have anything that was written by him, it could actually confirm it, that was where he was from.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Am I muted? Yeah. I have a cousin that kept the strong box from the day my daddy passed away. That was 1952. And I'm going to have to talk to him. I will definitely talk to him. And then
Oh, please,
there,
through Mark, just send me an image of his writing, and I would be happy to do my best.
that'd be awesome. I never got to meet him. He died before I was, well, he was just, so yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Kevin, I have a question for you. So years ago when I was at the Davin Leadership Training Institute with Reb Marsha and Reb Sean, a tear in, the Gidden came loose, right? And everybody gasped because they saw it. That might have been during Hagbah, I don't remember. And then Reb Marsha did the repair on site using dental floss. Would that dental floss need to be eventually replaced for that? Or is there anything, not kasher about a Torah that's been repaired with dental floss?
So, okay, this is great. I think that we are a pragmatic people, and I think this is something that Reb Zalman, articulated very well. That of course we write Torah and we use traditional materials, but it needs to be repaired, and if floss is what's there. So b'diavad, there's these wonderful concepts of lahatchila, before, and b'diavad, after the fact. So lahatchila, when you write a Torah, you can't use dental floss, but if it needs to be repaired and this is the best you can do, then, not to say now, let's just say it's not cricket, and it should be re-repaired with traditional materials, but it's, there's some latitude.
Yeah, thank you. And actually,
in repair only, yeah.
So you set up my next question, which is, can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Reb Zalman, Zichrono Livracha, and how he influenced you in any way?
So I was, even though I was in Philadelphia when he was there, I was in rabbinical school. I wasn't really his student, but he and my teacher Eric Ray were close. And when there was a lineage that I inherited as a sofer through my teacher. And as a then Reconstructionist rabbi, Reconstructionism is very committed to the idea that this is a human document. It seemed like, I'm not sure that my rabbinic lineage kind of goes with the scribal lineage. And years before Reb Zalman had suggested that I go through a process towards smicha, ordination, and which I did eventually. And yeah, I felt deployed. This is a great term that he had. I was deployed by him in ways that I think are still unfolding.
Amen. How many people raise your hand? The word deployed sounds familiar coming from Reb Zalman's mouth, right? A whole bunch of us. So I wouldn't be doing my job as the facilitator here if I didn't ask you both, Miriam and Kevin, what are you working on now?
Well, I'm working on my Doctor of Ministry project, which is due very soon, and it's about looking at these Czech scrolls and all the different, really reflecting on them and the different ways that we interact with them, towards some guidelines about how to think about them 100 years from now. All the rest is commentary.
And I am finishing up a Hanukkah music talk special for WQXR New York's Classical Radio. which has interviews with 6 prominent and some funny Jewish artists, including the Broadway star Tova Feldshuh, and their memories of Hanukkah and the music they associate with it. It's called Hanukkah Memories and Melodies. And you can listen to it at wqxr.org on December 15th at 9 p.m.
Great, terrific. Put that in the chat if you would.
Okay.
If you would do that. So I'm wondering, as we are coming in for a landing here, if there's a question that we have not asked you that you would like to answer, or maybe turn to each other and ask each other a question.
I can't because I'm trying to put this in the chat. So you go.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Well, Miriam asked me a lot of questions over the years, and I was determined to be her loyal subject. I will ask Miriam the question that others have asked, which is, say something about the experience of distilling 33 hours of, I think, already remarkable film to 23 minutes. And were there some things in particular that you were really sorry to have to let go?
Yeah, the cutting room floor, it's real. We interviewed a lot of the congregants, and they had beautiful things to say about this process, and we just couldn't include all of them. And also, for those of you who asked about how to know the provenance of a particular scroll, I filmed Kevin discussing that with someone from each of the 2 congregations, and he said, you could tell by the weight and the type of parchment and the lettering and all that, and those were wonderful scenes, and unfortunately they're not in the film.
Miriam, you have a question for Kevin?
Another?
I think I've asked him. Kevin, are you coming for Hanukkah next week? No, he's going to be in New York next week to look at a scroll, and it's during Hanukkah,
actually,
and I hope we're going to like it.
I hope so. I spent the last year and a half studying the tractate of the Talmud about get, Jewish divorce. And I'm going to a little gathering of the other guys I did this with to celebrate the conclusion of the study. And if I'm going to be in New Jersey, I could come to Brooklyn. And there's a great 1.5-year-old kid that I would love to sing Hanukkah songs with. So your grandson.
We would love to have you there for that. So does this mean you're going to a convention of go-getters?
Go-getters?
Couldn't resist.
Cutting room floor.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Miriam and Rabbi Kevin. This is fantastic. I need to point out that in the chat before, Bracha Lester wrote that, and I know this, Bracha, that Laura, your daughter, Laura Bellows, is a soferet. And I'm sorry, but the spell check didn't work when you wrote in that she's a shofarot. But I so that got me a chuckle. No. So I didn't know that. That's fantastic. And I just want to acknowledge all the people who are here for the first time, Barry and a number of other people. If you would, we have this much fun on Shabbat morning. We really do. And if you would like to be on our mailing list, either write to me, send me a private message in the chat, or go to minyanoneg.shabbat.org and write and tell us that you want to have more fun than you've ever had in a Zoom room, especially on Shabbat. And we'd be happy to welcome you some Shabbat morning or any other time. So let's end as we usually do, unless anybody has a final word. So we like to end with a song. So Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe. That there's that, you remember, melody that I know about you, but I've grown tired of Torah, Torah, Torah. No, well, we have a different melody that we use right before our Torah service, where we look at the Torah of each other's lives and share that. against the backdrop of the Parshat HaShavua. So, Moshniks, I invite you to sing along. Everybody else, oh, it's easy. Torah, tziva lanu Moshe, Morasha Kehilat Yaakov. Torah, tziva lanu Moshe, Morasha Kehilat Yaakov. Tziva lanu Moshe, tziva lanu Moshe. Where's Amy? She should be dancing. Morasha Kehilat Yaakov. Tziva lanu Moshe, tziva lanu Moshe, Morasha Kehilat Yaakov. Amy Rappel. Yai la la na na na, yai la 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 la, yai la la da da, yai da da da. Everybody sing. Yai la la na na na. You know the words. Yai da 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 da, yai da da da, yai da da da. By the light, by the Torah's eternal light, by the light, by the light, 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 by the Torah's eternal light, 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 Thank you, everyone, again for lending your holy presence to our gathering this evening. Thank you, Rabbi Kevin. Thank you, Miriam, for the beautiful, beautiful film that you've gifted us all with. Laila Tov, everyone.
Laila Tov.
Tודה רבה, לילה טוב.
Lila Tov, thanks
Laila
for
Tov.
Here's a nice postscript.
Program.
Thank you.
תודה רבה.
Dona Nodi Hashem Hashem Dona Nodi Hashem Sim Shalom Torah Sim Shalom Tova Bracha Harayom Harayom Shanti Om Om Shanti Om Shanti Om Assalamu alaikum Salam alaikum Salam alaikum alaikum
Laila Tov, everyone. Thank you, Reb Zalman.